How did your significant other change you for the worse? My boyfriend's New Year's resolution was to stop going to the gym. He told me on the first day of the year. We cleaned up our apartment after the party we had hosted the night before. He elaborated by saying the gym was no longer fun for him. His body had started hurting unbearably after sessions. He also detested the numerous vain fakers who just wanted photos and videos for social media. This all surprised me, as going to the gym and keeping in shape had always been one of his biggest passions. He had never previously mentioned body pain or expressed any dislike for fellow gymgoers. It also disappointed me as he had a killer body which I did not want to go away. His body was one of the main reasons I started going out with him in the first place. His personality helped as well, but let's be honest, a relationship is doomed if the attraction factor goes out the window. We were both approaching our 30s and had been going out with each other for 3 years after meeting through mutual friends. If anything, I thought he should have been going to the gym more to make sure getting older did not negatively impact his attractiveness and to keep me hanging around. However, I did not want to start the new year off with an argument. I said I would support his sole resolution. I jogged and swam religiously to maintain my shape and he asked me if I planned on keeping up these activities. I said I did and he looked slightly disappointed. It was like he also wanted me to stop exercising and look after my own body. I suddenly felt very angry and worried about our relationship, but I just bit my lip and we continued cleaning the apartment. Once we had taken out all the trash, my boyfriend sat down on the couch and picked up his Xbox controller. I asked him what he thought he was doing as we were meant to be meeting friends for a hike in the forest. My boyfriend said he didn't particularly like these friends anymore and no longer liked the idea of going for a hike. I said these plans had been set for weeks and I asked him why he now disliked these friends. He shrugged and started shooting zombies on the screen. I ended up going on the hike with our friends. I told them about his resolution to stop going to the gym but refrained from mentioning his newfound dislike for their company. One friend said I needed to be careful because this could be a sign of him getting complacent and taking me for granted. Another friend speculated that he was depressed and advised me to go easy on him. The third friend said he would end up missing the gym too much and eventually go back. As I left my friends headed back towards the apartment, I wondered which one of my friends, if any, would end up being right. Just so you have a better idea of our lives. I worked as an accountant in an office and he worked from home as a remote customer service agent. I got back from work one day a few weeks later and found my boyfriend splayed around the couch with the Xbox on again, several chocolate, candy, and chip wrappers spread around the couch, and brown and yellow crumbs scattered across his jacket. Now before I go any further, you must understand that my boyfriend could never previously have been accused of having a sweet tooth. He usually stuck to a very strict, healthy diet which a nutritionist friend of ours had put together for him. I had never seen him go on a trash food binge. He usually finished work an hour before I did and would have a healthy dinner cooked by the time I got home. He like a fat slob on the couch was not a sight that I expected or thought I would ever see. When I asked him what the hell he was doing, my boyfriend said he needed a new passion to replace the gym. He wanted that new passion to be enjoying the good things in life like trashy food. I started thinking he was playing some multi-week prank on me, but the look on his face told me he was being serious. I said I was worried about him and he told me to stop being dramatic. We were still getting on okay since he stopped going to the gym. His body was somehow holding up, but I just had a sinking feeling this would be the end of our relationship. Then things began getting very weird over the next few weeks. He stopped cooking and got fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Every single day. Burger King, McDonald's, and Wendy's bags and boxes infested our apartment. Most of the delivery drivers knew him by his first name, and he even invited one of them in for a game of Xbox. As you can imagine, as he had added binge eating to his non-gym attendance, his ABS faded and his stomach extended outwards. I lost all my attraction for him, then repeatedly threatened to pack up and leave. We had vicious arguments every night. Sometimes he ate during the arguments and I would throw the food against the wall. He said if I could not love him for who he had become then I should just leave him. He said he was happier than ever and finally felt confident in his own body. Friends told me to leave him but I had invested 3 years of my life into that relationship and didn't want it all to be for nothing. I still love the kind, funny man he had been before this whole mess. I was scared I would never find that love again if I left him. He was my first serious relationship. As pathetic as that sounds for a 30-year-old, I didn't think anybody besides him would ever want me. I had started thinking my friend who claimed he was having a breakdown was right. I didn't want to abandon the man I loved when he was at rock bottom, even if he didn't realize that he was there. I needed to help him and decided the best way to start was to find out exactly what had caused this bodily breakdown as he had abandoned all our mutual friends. I met some of his friends whom I did not know very well at a cafe in town. A small part of me thought they might somehow be the reason. I wondered if they had a big argument or fallout. I bought them all coffee and asked if they had any idea what might have triggered him. They have been asking themselves the same question while wondering if I might have been the cause. We laughed briefly at our similar lines of thought before becoming saddened again by the reason for our meeting. My boyfriend's friends said they found it hard to be around him anymore. They said he was hard to look at, a depressing sight, and that they felt sick at the thought of what all that trash food was doing to his body. One friend, and this for me was the scariest moment of the whole saga, said he was eating himself into an early grave. I think I found that moment to be scariest because I knew what his friends said was true. His friends told me I should go to the gym and see if they knew anything. They thought something might have happened there. At first, the woman at the counter said she couldn't tell me anything about their members due to data protection laws. Then I explained the situation to her and she got the manager. The manager told me my boyfriend had just canceled his membership after going to gym nearly every day for a decade. The manager also said that towards the end of his membership, my boyfriend would spend long periods just staring into space and not using any equipment. Whenever a staff member asked him if he was okay, my boyfriend would say he had realized how unhappy he was and that he knew a much easier way of being happy. It turned out that Wei had been ceasing exercise and recklessly eating. I went home, no nearer to finding the reason for my boyfriend's change of behavior. My boyfriend said we needed to have a serious talk and brought me into the kitchen where a half-eaten Domino's pizza sat on the table. A piece of pepperoni fell off his shirt. He said my hatred of his lifestyle was toxic for his own mental health and our overall relationship. He said I either needed to accept he had changed or else break up with him. I asked him if he was having a breakdown and he said no. He said he was having a glow up and living his best life. He pushed the pizza box across the table and invited me to join him. He said life was too short to not indulge and enjoy ourselves. In the back of my head, I was thinking about how much I loved him and did not want to lose him and how scared I was of never finding anybody else. Then I started thinking a little more about what exactly my boyfriend was saying. Maybe he was right. Maybe life was too short. Who cared what other people thought? A life of delicious food, zero stress about health or body shape, and a happy relationship suddenly seemed like a very appealing way to live. I tucked into a slice of Domino's pizza and a wide smile formed on my boyfriend's face. We went upstairs after finishing the pizza. I don't know what changed in me at that moment, but somehow what he said, it clicked. Why do we set ourselves to these societal norms that everyone has for each other when enjoyment is what we should be getting out of our lives? The point of my sharing this story is not to encourage people to not take care of themselves, but to say that if doing that doesn't give you enjoyment, then why continue to do it when we have so little in this world? While we have gotten a little chubbier as a couple over time, my love for him could never be better. That new attitude in life may have made us more unhealthy but also pushed us to find hobbies that we have always wanted to try and give a shot. Some are even exercise-based. We have a good life and that is all that matters to me. When did you realize your open marriage was a terrible idea? A week ago I discovered my husband was on a dating app. He was showering and I had picked up his phone to order our taxi. As the app was not working on my phone, the Tinder app icon covered my face on a screensaver photo of us. We were both 33 and been married for 2 years. I clicked on the icon and went through his profile. In his bio, he described himself as a single man looking for subtle fun. He listed his interests as music, movies, sports, reading, and going to the gym. This almost made me laugh. This man had not been to a gym in his life but was one of those lucky individuals who seemed to be in naturally good shape despite eating an ungodly amount of trash. He also wouldn't be able to tell anybody where the nearest bookshop was. All his photos were from our holiday in Europe. He had cropped me out of every single one. He had several active chats with different women. I heard the water turn off in the shower and threw his phone back onto the pillow on his side of the bed. I told him I no longer felt like going out to dinner and he started yelling about how I always changed my mind about everything. I curled up into a ball and told him to leave me alone. Then I started sobbing, and he let the towel fall from around his waist. He got dressed in the jeans and shirt I picked out for him. He stormed out of the house. I tortured myself, imagining him going to meet another woman from the app where we had originally met. I called my sister, my mother, and many of my friends. They all instructed me to leave him, and I insisted I could not. I simply loved the man too much. I wanted us to be one of those couples who grew old together and spent their twilight years knowing that they lived a life filled with love. I told myself that I would continue to let him use the app and have his flings as long as he always returned to me. I did not even plan to let him know that. I knew I did not want to put him under more stress or inflict more guilt than he probably already felt. That's how much I loved him. My husband got home around 3 a.m. and could only smell beer and sweat on him, no perfume. He apologized for losing his cool and I said I regretted not going to dinner. We had sex and he fell asleep. Shortly afterwards I slid his phone from under the pillow. My husband also did not know that I knew he used my birthday as the passcode on his phone. I used this fact to remind myself that he did love me and then went back onto his Tinder. I took photographs with my phone, his profile, his Tinder premium membership which gave him unlimited swipes, his matches, the messages they exchanged, and the profiles of his matches. I slid the phone back under his pillow. Like I said, I did not mind my husband having his fun, but I wanted to know all about it. I parked outside the supermarket and looked through the window. I saw her at register 7. The woman my husband had been seeing the most, the woman he saw on the night I discovered his presence on the app, had served me many times while I bought food for me and my husband. Her eyes locked onto me as I walked through the door. I picked up a basket and shopped like there was nothing wrong. I picked out all his favorite foods and wondered if she would recognize them. Their messages indicated they genuinely liked each other. They were more than just sex but less than a romantic threat. They were friends with benefits. He had reiterated early in their exchanges that he had no plans to leave me, which made me very happy but did not dampen my curiosity about the girls he visited. I lined up at her register. Although the cases were shorter than others, she was somehow prettier in person. She was only 19. She had all the beauty and glow of youth. She told me she was sorry and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. I noticed my hands had been shaking as I lifted the items out of the basket and placed them on the conveyor belt. She sensed my knowledge of the truth. I handed her a tissue from my purse and told her to pull herself together. I asked her what time she clocked off and after she answered I said I would pick her up. I warned her not to speak to my husband before our meeting at 7 o'clock. I collected the woman. She shivered as I drove and I put on the heating. I got us both milkshakes at the McDonald's driveway and parked at the entrance to the forest on the outside of the town. By now her hands were shaking but I told her to relax. I promised I was not going to hurt her. I said I just wanted somewhere quiet where me and I could talk. She started rambling and I could not understand her. I insisted she calm down, have some of her strawberry shake, and speak slower. She detailed how he said we had an open marriage. He had claimed I was also on the app and regularly seeing other men. She informed me that he met several women around town. I wondered how many people in my hometown thought I slept around and was in an open marriage. Although such spousal behavior may have enraged many people, my main priority was still retaining my husband and keeping my marriage intact. I explained to her that I did not want him to know that I knew. I told her that I did not mind her sleeping with my husband as long as she would never try to take him away from me. The teenager then started sobbing about how she could never possibly continue seeing him after this supposedly horrendous experience. I lifted my purse from between my purse, pulled out a fistful of notes, and dropped them onto her lap. I asked her if this brought back his appeal. The sobbing girl counted the notes and wiped her eyes, which dried remarkably quickly. She nodded quickly and pocketed the cash. I started the car and drove her home. I realized I was paying this woman to continue sleeping with my husband and I laughed. That night, as I lay beside my husband in bed and smiled at his cute snores, I felt satisfied. Although the cashier was the only one who sensed that I knew, I scouted out all the women my husband was sleeping with. I concluded each of them was worthy of such a magnificent man, but would also not threaten our marriage. After 20 minutes of failing to sleep, I got an idea. Why not make his lies into truths? Why not let him know that I knew about his affairs but did not mind? Then I thought he would not mind if I also had my fun on the side. I also felt certain this would alleviate any guilt he felt about sleeping around. I thought an equal playing field would equal a happy marriage. I downloaded Tinder on my phone and quickly set up a profile. I kept him in my pictures. I was certainly not ashamed of our now open marriage. I copied his interest exactly. I thought that was cute. In my bio, I described myself as a happily married woman who wanted a bit of fun on the side. The matches immediately came flooding in. The back of my phone started feeling overly hot and I briefly worried it would explode. I started conversing with a man 2 years older than me. That's one way I did differ from my husband. I could never sleep with anybody significantly younger. This man complimented my appearance and made me laugh with cheesy pickup lines. I agreed to meet him that night. I turned to tell my husband I was accepted of unfaithfulness and was going out to officially make our marriage open like he had been telling everybody. I felt a tingle in my stomach of how happy a reaction he would have. Then I decided to let my beautiful king enjoy his sleep and came up with an even better way of telling him the marvelous news. My Tinder match picked me up in his pickup truck outside our home. The neighbor's bedroom curtains twitched as the match drove off, with me in the passenger seat with his hand on me. His house was on the other side of town and our hands got very adventurous on the way over while Taylor Swift played on the radio. I had never been happier in my entire life and I felt my marriage had never been in a better place. We were both getting the thrill of new flames but also got to retain the love from our marriage. The man had a nice house on the other side of town. He poured 2 glasses of expensive wine and took me upstairs. We had a long, deeply satisfying time together. When he had finally finished, I asked for a selfie. I wanted a photograph to accompany the text, informing my husband of the wonderfully legitimate openness of our marriage. The man smiled and stuck up his thumb. I tiled my head slightly sideways and stuck out my tongue. Immediately after I sent the text, my husband called me. I answered the phone with the biggest smile on my face and immediately burst into tears when he said the word divorce. Caught husband with my best friend. I, 38 female, and my husband, 40 male, have been together since I was 20, and he 22. We have one child together who is 17, male. I have known my best friend, 38 female, since we were 11. We will call besties Sarah and hubby Joe. Sarah and I do not get to see each other in the way that we used to, as about 6 years ago, she moved to a different province. She is roughly 3 hours away. We text bi-daily at the least, and usually video chat 2 times a week with a glass of wine and weekly recaps. Suffice to say we are, or were, still very close despite the distance life has dealt us. Now Joe travels a lot for work, and it's not uncommon for him to be gone for a week at a time here and there. He usually leaves on a Saturday or a Sunday and checks into his hotel so he is fresh-faced on Monday. Always home on weekends. On this particular Wednesday, he said he was going to leave that Friday instead, as he had some prep work to do before Monday and just wanted to allot himself enough time to do so without stressing last minute. I didn't think much of it and told him it made sense. I looked forward to having the house to myself for the weekend as my son was going to his best friends to game for the weekend as they often do. Friday rolls around, and my boy comes home from school, packs his things, and heads out. All is good there. Joe's flight was at 8:40 p.m. so we still got to enjoy dinner together before he left for the airport. He kisses me, and leaves. The house is quiet. Too quiet. I get some tidying done, have a relaxing bath, and tuck in with some Netflix. Life's good. I wake up on Saturday and tackle the day with some Christmas shopping and lunch. I arrive back home around 1 p.m. and get a load of laundry done. This brings me to about 3 p.m. It sounds silly, but as much as I was looking forward to being alone all weekend, I was bored and over it by this point so I figured hey, I'm gonna grab a bottle of wine and call Sarah up later for some girl time to help my evening go by a lot faster. In the same breath, I realized heck it. I have nobody to cook for or cater to tonight. I am gonna surprise her in person with a bottle of wine. Into the car, I go. I arrive in her area at around 7 p.m., all giddy and pumped up. I know she is going to be stunned and excited when she opens the door. Let the squeals ensue. Well, as I rounded the corner onto her block, I was the stunned one. There is another car there. My husband's make and model. My heart drops, but I tell myself there is just no way and I actually feel guilty and silly for thinking it could be him. It is a common vehicle after all. As I pull up to the house, I can see now it is his car. I am sick. Beyond sick. I can't describe the sinking feeling I felt, as I can honestly say it's the first time I've ever had that feeling. I kept trying to justify an innocent reason for this and I came up empty-handed. Anger sets in. I walk up to the door and begin pounding in the way I imagine the police would do in dire urgency. I hear Sarah's footsteps approaching and a confused tone in her voice as I hear her say I really don't know, I'm not expecting anybody. Our eyes meet as she peeks through the little decorative diamond-shaped glass of her front door. Ooh, she says, as she heel spins to walk away but back again. I tell her to open the door. At this point, my husband has heard me through the front door and I hear him groan and say something along the lines of this can't be real. Did you tell her to come here? How did she know? She opens the door, and he acts as if I didn't just hear their exchange of words on the other side of the door. I demand to know WTF this is. She is completely stunned and stands back with her hand over her mouth as he fumbles his words and tells me he stopped there before leaving for his trip to plan a surprise New Year party for me with Sarah. As if. I quickly tell him that's not true, and such a thing can also be correlated via any other source of communication that does not include spending the night with my best friend. I look past them to see what looks to be the aftermath of a romantic dinner for 2 on her dining room table and a cozy blanket on her couch with 2 glasses on the coffee table. I am in tears at this point. He has the nerve to then accuse me of having looked through his messages and being the sneaky one. I am baffled. I tell him to get his crap and get out of there. He refuses, citing he still has to leave for his work trip the following day. I tell him not. Get your things and we are getting a room for the night to discuss this. He reluctantly agrees. He asks me to wait in the car for him, which I say no to. I begin to yell at Sarah as he scampers around collecting his whatnots. She is apologetic but tells me she hopes this is just a bump in our friendship and we can work past this. What an absolute joke. This is not a bump, but an entire mountain that has been placed on and crushed any remnants of our friendship. Fast forward to finally getting to a hotel with space, husband confesses, as if I needed a confession, to having been with her a few times in the past, but maintaining a long-distance relationship with Sarah for the past 4 years. 4 years. I am breathless. He subsequently cancels his work trip and ends up coming back home, where we spend most of the next day arguing before our son comes home that evening. We keep it hush around him, but he can tell we are on the outs. This brings us to now. The following Friday. We have spent all week arguing, talking, crying, and just trying to figure out where to go from here. We always had a loving relationship. He says he just got bored but has developed deep feelings for Sarah and vice versa. He begs for forgiveness daily and has made a point to cut ties with Sarah to try and save our marriage, but my trust is non-existent, and my hurt-o-meter is redlined. I've been too ashamed to share this information with other friends, especially the friends Sarah and I have in common. When did jealousy get the best of your significant other? My husband got jealous because a customer with Down syndrome at my restaurant only wanted me to serve him every day. It ruined my marriage. I've been married to my husband for about 2 years, together for 5. We have 2 children and I honestly couldn't be happier until my husband found out about the customer. I run a cafe with my sister and it's located in a very popular neighborhood with lots of office workers. There's also some type of day center. This day center is for people with different kinds of disabilities. They do simpler types of work. There's a boy who is maybe 25 to 30 with Down syndrome who works there. Every morning his taxi drops him off at 7:30 and he comes to our cafe, gets breakfast and coffee and sits on the same table facing my workstation. He doesn't say much, just smiles and asks how I am today and what my plans are. He refuses when my sister or one of the girls helps him. It must be me. If I'm busy, he waits until I'm available. Then he starts his day at 8 o'clock. We close at 4 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. he comes again and sits at the same table until his taxi comes around 4 o'clock, and usually I give him a soda or a smoothie on the house. But apparently, when I'm not working he gets very confused, stays for a while without understanding I'm not there, and then leaves without eating. My sister and her wife were invited for dinner with me and my husband. I was homesick the week before, so she was laughing and telling us about the boy and how he refused to be served by any other and just waited outside for me. My husband was confused, so my sister explained everything about this customer. My husband was silent for the rest of the dinner. When they went home, he asked me why I never told him about this customer and that he thought that the guy was being disrespectful. He asked if he knew I was married. I was confused as to why he would say something like that. Then he became angry because I said that he had Down syndrome. He said that there are functioning people with this syndrome and that I was the prejudiced one, not him. I told him that I was aware of that, but this boy in question seemed and appeared to be much younger, and when he started, one of the people working in the day center noticed his behavior and came to check if he was making us uncomfortable and explained that he had the mind of an 8-year-old and his creature of habit at the time. We told them that he was very polite and pleasant to have as a customer. My husband wasn't happy about it. Next week my husband showed up at 7:30 and took that exact table the boy usually takes. When he came, he was very flustered and didn't know what to do, so he just stood near my workstation with his sandwich and coffee in hand. I asked him if he wanted me to help him find another table, but my husband was very angry and told the boy to respect me because I'm a married woman and to not come and stare at me again. The boy apologized and he just left and waited outside all confused. I was heartbroken and begged my husband to apologize and leave the table because the boy is a creature of habit and doesn't really like changes. He said he didn't care because obviously, he was in love with me. My sister told my husband about how I got a Valentine's card last year. When I got home, my husband said that he makes good money and we don't need my income. He had contacted my sister to ask her to take over my share of the cafe because I didn't need to work. He said he was disappointed because I never told him about my customer or the card he gave me, so I must have thought it was out of line. But it wasn't like that at all. It's just that I get hundreds of customers every day and I don't have to tell my husband about all of them. He said it wasn't the same as someone who's in love with me being in my cafe every day and sometimes when I'm alone. This infuriated me, but we were somewhat made up and I thought we would be okay. All that to say, the next morning he was almost non-talkative to me. I asked him if he was still mad and he said he just needed time to think about things. I had no idea what that meant and I was still pissed at him because of his irrational thinking about this whole situation. Ever since that day, he hasn't been the same. He doesn't do it all the time, but he will avoid me on certain days when I tell him about a funny story at the restaurant. The spark was slowly fading and I didn't know what to do about it but resigned from it. I had hoped that if I did that he would be happy and we could move on from this whole stupid ordeal. When I told him the news, he acted happy, but it was obvious that he was faking it in some aspect. At this point, I'm starting to suspect that he is losing feelings for me as he has seemed to have more frequent late nights at the office. If what I'm thinking he is doing is true, my heart is already shattered. Every time I try to talk to him, he just shuts me down with a lie about how he loves me and everything is fine. I can't make him budget and I feel like I'm trapped in a hole with no way out. What should I do? I thought I was marrying my soulmate. Turns out he was playing a prank on me the whole time. Why can't we have the ones we really want? And why do we want it more when we know we can't have it anymore? Like when you go shopping and you find this last pair of shoes that you've been eyeing for ages, only to have the salesperson tell you that it doesn't have your size? But perhaps the biggest frustration that I have in my life is Simon, my childhood best friend, my mentor, my confidant, and my soulmate. You see, Simon and I have this special relationship. He called it friendship. I called it love. Not just platonic love, but a romantic kind of love. But he would always dismiss my declarations and tell me to stop joking. But I never joked when it came to my feelings for him. One time I mustered enough courage to invite him to a dinner date. I specifically mentioned it was going to be fine dining, so he needed to dress up like wearing a tux or something. He did show up in a tux, but then we spent the night talking about LeBron's mind-blowing stats in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So there I was, in a black mini dress, sipping champagne while figuring out how to turn this conversation around. I decided I couldn't wait any longer for him to catch feelings for me. I needed to make the first move for 2 reasons. 1, I was about to go to London for a summer vacation, and so I wouldn't be seeing him for months. And 2, we were about to go to college and that meant we would be separated for years. With a little touch of blush on my cheeks and a whole lot of confidence, I walked to his house to finally propose. But as the door opened, he stood there with a blonde girl who was about my age, a little skinny, but her chest was twice the size of mine. Simon introduced her as Millie, his girlfriend, his first ever. I was speechless the whole time, but I was quietly backtracking in my head. When this happened, I was sure I knew all of his activities for the past 13 years. And so Simon and Millie became a couple, and I, the one who loved him before he even had body hair, became their lousy third wheel. I knew things were not going to be the same after Millie came into his life, but the good thing was I had college and a whole life ahead of me to keep me distracted from my heartbreak. But life has a way of making us deal with unfinished business, the least we expected. Years later, I met Simon and Millie at a music festival. They were still together, perhaps even closer than they were when we were teenagers with just one look. I knew Simon was in love because that was how we had always been. We knew each other's deepest thoughts and emotions, even without uttering a single word. I believed that we were connected by some invisible thread, and at one point I even believed soulmates were a higher tier than lovers. And that was why when I saw Simon's eyes glow, I knew he was in a happy place. So when he told me that they were going to get married, I shouldn't have felt bad because we were soulmates and soulmates share each other's happiness, but I felt like the entire world came down on me. I forced myself to sound happy and excited, and nobody suspected I was faking it. So as the night went on, I got to talk to Millie and she mentioned inviting her ex to the wedding. Because she got an invitation to her ex's wedding last year too, she wasn't sure if Simon would be pleased with the idea, and so she asked for my opinion since I knew him well right there. And then an idea came up. The next day I got in contact with Brad, Millie's ex, and introduced myself as her friend. But instead of telling him about Millie's forthcoming wedding, I asked him if he truly loved his wife because Millie was only getting married to Simon to get over his marriage to another woman. Brad's face lit up when he heard the rest of the story, and I knew then I could pull this off. I didn't exactly know the details of what happened next, but one day Simon came to my house crying. Millie called off the wedding and got back together with Brad. Yes, Brad filed for divorce after learning from an undisclosed source that Millie still loved him. Well, it wasn't 100% accurate, but the fact that they got back together meant Millie still had some feelings for her high school boyfriend, and so when I told Simon about it, I expected him to thank me, but he got this angry look on his face and swore at me for the very first time. I was in total disbelief that my soulmate could get this mad at me when he should be thanking me for saving him from a complete disaster. Why couldn't he see that Millie was only using him? And even if I had a hand in her, reconciliation with her ex wasn't at all for the best. Simon went away for a month and refused to take any of my calls. I was dead set on getting back in his good graces, so I sent him hundreds of I'm sorry messages every day. I realized that I would rather have him as a friend than nothing at all, and so, to my surprise, Simon showed up one day with a bouquet of daisies as a peace offering. He apologized for trash-talking me, but I told him that I deserved the hate for what I did. But something strange happened after that meeting. Simon became sweet and loving like he suddenly saw me in a different light. All those daydreams that I had when we were young were now coming true. I thought I'd lost him for good when I ruined his relationship with Millie, but the stars were finally aligning for me. We dated for a couple of months and Simon was everything I dreamed of as a lover. I was wrong when I said soulmates were better than lovers because was I kidding? I totally wanted Simon as a lover. Everything soon became a blur, and though we knew each other for decades, our romance took off at lightning speed. And then the unthinkable happened. Simon proposed to me and wanted to get married within 2 weeks. I said yes, of course. Why wait? When I had waited for a lifetime already, we quickly arranged the church ceremony and the reception and informed everyone of the good news. Most of our friends were deliriously happy for us, but my sister warned me that Simon could be using me to get back at Millie. I calmed her down and assured her that Simon was going to marry me because I was the one he truly loved. Now, on the wedding day itself, I was a nervous wreck, but I reminded myself that I had to be the best bride ever. Not just because I was marrying my soulmate, but because I wanted Simon to be proud of me. I stood by the church entrance and was relieved to see Simon standing at the altar. See, this was no longer just a dream. As I marched down the aisle, I could see him smiling at me. There wasn't anything that I could ask for more at that moment. Everything I wished for was coming true. By the time I got to the altar, Simon's smile disappeared. He grabbed the microphone from the stand and announced that he was not going to push through with the wedding. My jaw dropped to the floor like I'd been punched right in my face. Simon went on to say that he never loved me and that I was stupid for believing all the lies he told me. He made me believe that there was going to be a wedding and he was ready to pay for all the expenses just to make sure that he got his revenge on me. I ran out of the church crying because I didn't want to hear the rest of his speech. It had been a year since Simon had played me for a fool. To this day, I still couldn't believe that my soulmate, the only man that I had truly loved, played a prank on me on my wedding day. My future sister-in-law is legitimately stupid and I do not want my brother to marry her. My future sister-in-law, 25, is breathtakingly stupid and I cannot stand her. I do not want her to be the mother of my future nieces and nephews. Our father lost his left leg below the knee in an accident before my brother and I were born, and when she first came over to our house to meet me and my parents, she said, "Oh wow, it's crazy how brother and op didn't inherit that." We all laughed uncomfortably thinking it was a bad joke. She didn't laugh. Even after my brother explained it wasn't a genetic defect, it was an injury, she still thought there was a possibility that my brother or I would be born with a missing leg. She told us she believed in Santa until she was 16, and her parents had to break it to her and it broke her heart. You know the joke that the pee is stored in the balls? She thought that was real. She asked my brother how pee didn't come out when he came during sexy time. She commented that she never sees pink lemons in the store. She thought pink lemonade was made from pink lemons. She didn't realize Donald Trump the actor and Donald Trump the president were the same person. And speaking of Trump, she too tried to look at the solar eclipse without sunglasses despite my brother pleading with her to keep them on. She thought blood diamonds meant they were made from blood, and we found out because she asked how come the diamonds, aren't red? She thought to play for a city sports team you had to be from that city. So it confused her when one of our players got traded. She asked, well, what other team do we have here? She didn't think platypuses were real. She once tried to correct me when I mentioned something being $100 million. She goes, don't you mean $1 billion? Because she didn't think $100 million was a real number. She thought it was 99 million and then 1 billion. She thinks the moon gives off light. I tried to tell her it's the reflection of the sun, and she argued with me saying that couldn't be true because the sun was down behind the earth and if it was lighting the moon it would light up the entire world. She thought Obama did the I have a dream speech. I could go on for days, and I might edit this post as I remember more examples of her moments. She's been with my brother since he was in college. She was not in college with him. They met at a music festival. She said she didn't want to go to college because it seems super hard. I have such a hard time being around her. I do not understand what the F my brother sees in her. Do not get it. He's a software engineer making 6 figures, and she works as a hairdresser, so I see why she's with him. I want to ask him why he would want to marry such a effing moron. It's embarrassing when she talks and he brings her around people he works with. I would be mortified if I was him. I asked my parents about having an intervention with him after he announced that he was proposing to her, and they told me no, that they thought she was sweet, that my brother considers her his best friend, and they work well together. Does no one else worry that she could make a terrible decision and severely affect my brother? Or when they have kids she could put them in harm's way? What could she possibly teach them? It's not a matter of her being innocently stupid. She could have real life consequences for being this dim-witted. Keeping me up at night with your parties. Enjoy being shamed on the national news. In September 2020, the apartment next to mine was rented out to 2 young women, both students. After they settled in a bid, it turned out they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to COVID, and you were supposed to only have 1 fixed visitor over, but then again, to be young again, etc. So I didn't really care during this time. I was working in healthcare. I work with a mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning I got called upon to attend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining or were effectively diagnosed with COVID. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spent about 10-50 hours a day at work with a full-hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all the time, so I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party. But I'm pretty chill and know that living in the city some noise is to be expected. So they are having their party and I can stand some noise and music, but this party was effing wild. People shouting full on in the hallway, wrecking things, and spilling alcohol everywhere. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company of about 20 plus people to leave and if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to work and get up at 6 a.m. every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of the night and that they wouldn't have a party the next day. Plot twist. They didn't keep it down and they did have another party the next night and then did another one the day after. At this point, I'd been going a full 3 nights without sleep and was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place because it would be packed with people and I work with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread COVID to. This was pre-tests, pre-vaccines, pretty much of the knowledge we now have about COVID. Luckily the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice it to say I didn't like my new neighbors. During the next few weeks they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people coming over during the night. And by constant I mean constant. Their bell would ring 70 times a night and people would always be coming or going, and those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically, I couldn't rely on sleep at night. It drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I couldn't grasp how they could know this many people who would always be coming and going during one night while knocking on their door to complain about the noise. I encountered my upstairs neighbor and decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bits of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar and hang out. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID and all those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends, etc. And the boys from across the street would also come over 15 a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically, our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now, so we tried talking to the girls, but then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us. When we asked them to be quiet at 4 a.m. in the morning, most of them just laughed at us as if we were the pesky neighbors. No doubt even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the time they weren't let in and the police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point, and what they were doing was full of illegal. Even so, the police told us their hands were tied if they wouldn't open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker, so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. This is what I did in most places. Student unions, police, and town hall were understanding but couldn't really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls, Dean. I sent him a nice email about how I was sorry for bothering him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time. Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to the papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the papers. At this point, this Dean called me back right away and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was on it. So basically what he did was call the law student girl and her parents. Big drama ensued and we finally got to sit down with the girls and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience for, to be honest. We learned that the police had actually been inside a few times and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were €300 each a pop. So no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there's your problem. You are still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 o'clock every day, and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge and we got to vent. But we kept it kind of nice and parted on good terms, hoping that this would be it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be here, right? You'd think they would have gotten the point now and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly fewer people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave, and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy. While I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year, never mind the people at my work who were forbidden from even going to their own family, the whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and it sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story but weren't sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the waters. It got quite some comments and upvotes, and it seemed most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with the upstairs neighbor, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice director who had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. This person is one of 12 vice directors for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so quite high up, things moved fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been to our address dozens of times and across the street and weren't let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we hoped they would finally intervene the next day. The piece was on their website. It went viral there and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational enough, mentioning the dozens of times police had shown up and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice director contacted us to take our statements, which we already had prepared on paper, and informed us they would investigate and could possibly start disciplinary actions. At the same time, more reporters were contacting me throughout the day, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university to the printed articles. The next day, while at work, I got a message from the upstairs neighbor that a film crew from the National News Watch was at our doorstep. He declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. And sure enough, that night at 7 p.m. here was my street in a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times and the local press cop talking about the troubles of closed doors. The best part about it was that a student from the offending frat house across the street had let the film crew in and said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of towards the university, that they had been having parties and didn't let the cops in, and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that was a good idea anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer. The press died down some time later and the disciplinary action from the university went through before the hearing. We sat down with the girls from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends because we put in a kind of good word for them. They got the lighter end of the stick, 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guys across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. The sad part is that most of them sounded just like dumb young kids. But that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action.